Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Amaya's day went from routine maintenance to interstellar incident the moment she heard chittering behind the storage units. The Galactic Concordance Station was, for lack of a better term, absolutely massive. Picture a city floating in space, except this city had about 3,000 different architectural styles, all crammed together because nobody could agree on what aesthetically pleasing meant when you had species ranging from gelatinous blobs to crystalline hive minds, all trying to share the same zip code. The station orbited a neutral planet that nobody wanted and everybody needed, making it the perfect spot for the galaxy's most powerful species to meet, argue, and occasionally throw drinks at each other in the name of diplomacy. Amaya worked the graveyard shift. Well, they called it that, even though graveyard implied darkness and quiet, and space was already pretty dark and quiet to begin with, so the term felt redundant. But humans brought their idioms with them to the stars, and damned if they were going to stop now. She was a maintenance technician, which was a fancy way of saying she fixed things when they broke, and things broke constantly because apparently advanced interstellar civilizations still couldn't figure out how to make a toilet that worked for more than 6 species at a time. Tonight, or this morning, or whatever the hell 200 hours counted, as when you lived on a space station that didn't have a sun. Amaya was elbow-deep in a ventilation panel in the xenobiology wing. The problem, as she'd diagnosed it, was that someone had tried to route the atmosphere controls through a system designed for methane breathers, and now the oxygen levels kept spiking in random corridors. Not great when you had species who could literally catch fire if they breathed too much of the stuff. She was muttering to herself, as one does when they're alone and irritated, something about idiots with engineering degrees who couldn't read a basic schematic when she heard it. Chittering. Not the normal kind of station noise, the hum of life support, or the whisper of air through ducts. This was organic, high-pitched, and it was coming from somewhere behind the storage units. Amaya pulled herself out of the panel, wiped her hands on her pants, and grabbed her flashlight. The xenobiology wing was supposed to be empty at this hour. The scientists who worked here kept normal schedules, mostly because studying alien life forms was apparently exhausting, and they needed their beauty sleep. She moved quietly, boots barely making a sound on the metal floor, and followed the noise. The storage bay was supposed to be locked. It wasn't. The door hung open about 15 centimeters, just enough for something small to slip through. Amaya pushed it wider and shone her light inside. 6 pairs of eyes reflected back at her, glowing in the beam like tiny stars. "Oh, hell," Amaya whispered. They were Vreknari cubs. She knew this because she'd seen exactly one Vreknari adult in her entire 3 years on the station, and that had been enough to permanently etch the species into her memory. Vreknari looked like what would happen if you took a wolf, crossed it with a velociraptor, gave it crystalline spines running down its back, and then supersized the whole package. The adult she'd seen had been nearly 3 meters tall at the shoulder. These cubs were maybe knee-high, but they had the same distinctive spines, the same elongated snouts full of far too many teeth, and the same unsettling intelligence in their eyes. They chittered at her, pressing themselves against the back wall of the storage bay. Scared. Definitely scared. Amaya's brain, which normally functioned at a reasonably competent level, decided this was a great time to access her memory banks. She'd heard something 2 days ago in the cafeteria. 2 Vreknari diplomats, parents with cubs, killed in a shuttle accident. Mechanical failure. The kind of tragedy that made everyone on the station go quiet for a while, because death was death no matter what species you belonged to. These had to be their cubs, and nobody had come for them. "Okay," Amaya said softly, crouching down to make herself smaller. Not threatening. "Okay, little guys, it's all right. I'm not gonna hurt you." The cubs chittered more frantically. One of them, braver or more desperate than the others, took a half-step forward. It was thin. They were all thin. Their spines, which should have been bright and crystalline, looked dull. Amaya's heart, which was supposed to be smart enough to recognize danger, apparently decided to take a vacation. She reached into her toolkit and pulled out her lunch. Nutrient bar. Protein heavy. She broke off a piece and tossed it gently toward the cubs. The brave one sniffed it, looked at Amaya, sniffed it again, then snatched it up and devoured it in 2 bites. The other 5 rushed forward. "Whoa! Whoa! Easy!" Amaya broke off more pieces, distributing them as evenly as she could. "You guys are starving. When's the last time anyone fed you?" They didn't answer, obviously, because they were alien predator babies and not particularly chatty. But they ate like they hadn't seen food in days, which, given the timeline, they probably hadn't. Amaya sat back on her heels and watched them. This was bad. This was very bad. Vreknari cubs without parents, abandoned on a station that was absolutely not equipped to handle them. The xenobiology department would have protocols, but those protocols probably involved sedation and cages and a lot of paperwork. And these cubs had just lost their parents. They didn't need cages. They needed someone who gave a damn. "All right," Amaya said, making a decision that would definitely come back to bite her. Possibly, literally. "Let's get you some real food." She stood up slowly. The cubs watched her, still chewing. She took a step toward the door. They didn't move. She took another step. The brave one, the first one who'd taken food from her, chirped once and followed. Then another cub followed. Then another. Within 30 seconds, all 6 of them were trailing behind her like she was some kind of Pied Piper for apex predators. Amaya looked down at them. They looked up at her. Their spines flickered slightly in the low light. "You guys have absolutely terrible survival instincts," Amaya informed them. "Following a strange human? Really? I could be anyone." The brave cub chirped again and bumped against her leg. "Yeah, okay. I'm a softie. You got me." Amaya started walking. "Come on. Cafeteria's this way. We'll get you something better than my sad excuse for lunch." The cubs fell into formation behind her. Not chaotic, not scattered. They lined up, 2 by 2, like tiny soldiers on a march. It was the kind of instinctive behavior that spoke to pack dynamics, to a species that valued order even at a young age. Amaya glanced back at them and couldn't help but smile. "Well, aren't you all just stupidly adorable little murder machines?" They chittered in response, and Amaya led her tiny army out of the storage bay and into the corridor, completely unaware that she was about to cause the biggest panic the Galactic Concordance Station had seen in at least 6 months. And that was really saying something, considering last month someone had accidentally released a swarm of phosphorescent insects into the main assembly hall during a trade negotiation. This was going to be so much better. The corridors of the Galactic Concordance Station at 0300 hours were not, technically speaking, empty. There were always stragglers, always the night shift workers who kept the station running while everyone else slept. Maintenance crews, security patrols, the occasional insomniac diplomat wandering around trying to figure out if that weird feeling in their thorax was anxiety or just bad cuisine from Sector 9. What the corridors were not prepared for, however, was Amaya strolling through them with 6 Vreknari cubs trailing behind her like she was taking the galaxy's most dangerous kindergarten class on a field trip. The first person to spot them was a Quellan security officer whose name Amaya had never bothered to learn. Quellans were slug-like, about 2 meters long when fully extended, with a disturbing number of eye stalks that let them see in basically every direction at once. This particular Quellan was doing his rounds, probably thinking about whatever slug people thought about at 3 in the morning, when he turned a corner and came face to face with the parade. He froze. All of him. Even his eye stalks stopped moving. Amaya gave him a friendly nod. "Evening." The Quellan made a noise that sounded like someone stepping on a wet sponge. His eye stalks swiveled to focus on the cubs, who were still marching in perfect formation, their little claws clicking against the metal floor. "Those are," the Quellan managed, his translator struggling to keep up with his panic. "Those are Vreknari." "Yeah," Amaya said, like this was the most normal conversation in the universe. "Found them in storage. They're hungry." "Vreknari," the Quellan repeated, because apparently his brain had decided to stick on that one word. "Vreknari cubs. You are walking with Vreknari cubs." "I know what they are," Amaya said, a little annoyed now. "Look, I'm taking them to get food. You want to help? Or you want to just stand there making noises?" The Quellan's response was to slap a tendril against the wall panel and trigger the nearest emergency alarm. The sound was deafening, a blaring klaxon that echoed through the corridor and probably woke up half the station. The cubs, who had been perfectly calm up until that moment, started chittering in distress, their spines rattling. Amaya spun on the Quellan, fury written across her face. "Are you kidding me right now? Shut that damn thing off. You'll scare the babies." "Babies?" the Quellan squeaked. "Those are apex predators." "They're 3 months old," Amaya shot back. "They're scared and hungry, and you just made it worse." She turned to the cubs, dropping into a crouch. Hey, it's okay. Just noise. Just stupid noise. You're all right." She kept her voice low, soothing, the kind of tone you'd use with a spooked animal back on Earth. The cubs pressed closer to her, still chittering but calmer now. The brave one, who Amaya was starting to think of as the leader, bumped its snout against her hand. The Quellan was frantically working the wall panel, trying to shut off the alarm. It finally cut out, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. "Thank you," Amaya said, dripping with sarcasm. "That was super helpful." The Quellan didn't respond. He was too busy retreating down the corridor, leaving a trail of slime in his wake. Typical. Amaya stood up and resumed walking. "Come on, guys. Let's go before someone else decides to be an idiot." But the damage was done. The alarm had done its job. Within minutes, the station's rumor mill was churning at full speed, and security feeds were being pulled up on monitors across multiple departments. In the station's command center, Commander Thalquin was having his sleep cycle very rudely interrupted. He was Draven, which meant he had 8 limbs, 3 of which were currently tangled in his sleeping hammock as he tried to extract himself and figure out what the emergency was. Draven were built like someone had taken an octopus and decided it needed an exoskeleton and a really bad attitude. Thalquin had been in the military for 60 cycles before taking this diplomatic post, and he'd seen some things. War zones, first contacts gone wrong, that one incident with the Quilnath ambassador, and the ceremonial jelly that nobody talked about anymore. But watching the security feed of a human calmly walking through his station with 6 Vreknari cubs in tow? That was new. "Is this live?" he demanded, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into galactic common. Lieutenant Vux, his second-in-command, nodded. Vux was Curine, bird-like and logical to a fault, with feathers that shifted colors based on their mood. Right now, those feathers were a confused mix of blue and yellow. Affirmative, Commander. The human maintenance technician, Amaya. She appears to be escorting them. Escorting, Thalquin repeated. That's what we're calling it. Would you prefer leading? Vux asked. I'd prefer an explanation for why there are Vreknari cubs on my station in the first place, Thalquin said, pulling up additional feeds. Where are their guardians? Vux pulled up a file with unsettling speed. The cubs belong to diplomats Vren and Shal, both killed in the shuttle accident 2 days ago. Protocol required notification of next of kin, but there were delays in communication. The cubs were temporarily housed in xenobiology storage pending retrieval. Storage, Thalquin said flatly. Someone put Vreknari cubs in storage. It was deemed the most secure location, Vux said, which was Kareen for, yes, that was monumentally stupid, but I wasn't involved. Thalquin watched the feed. Amaya had made it another 2 corridors. Other species were starting to notice. A group of Trilaxians, crystalline beings who normally moved with serene grace, scattered like someone had thrown a grenade. A maintenance bot actually reversed direction and fled. And through it all, Amaya just kept walking, talking to the cubs like they were puppies. She's insane, Thalquin said. She's human, Vux corrected. That's what I said. On the feed, Amaya stopped to let the cubs investigate a wall panel. One of them was sniffing at it curiously. She gently redirected it, pointing down the corridor. The cubs chittered and resumed their march. Should we intervene? Vux asked. Thalquin considered this. His military training said yes, immediately. Establish a perimeter and neutralize the threat. But his diplomatic experience said something different. He'd worked with humans before. They were bizarre, reckless. They did things that made no sense by any logical standard, and then, somehow, those things worked. They'd seen Earth's files, the classified ones, a death world, gravity too high, temperature swings too extreme, predators too numerous. And humans had not just survived, but thrived. No, Thalquin decided. Let's watch. Prepare medical teams, but do not approach. I want to see how this plays out. The Vreknari cubs are extremely dangerous, Vux pointed out. To everyone except her, apparently, Thalquin said. Send word to xenobiology. Get Dr. Fenn online. I want expert analysis. Vux's feathers shifted to efficient green, and they began working the communications panel. Amaya, blissfully unaware that she now had an audience of several hundred beings watching her via security feeds, reached the cafeteria doors. The station's main cafeteria never actually closed. It operated on a reduced capacity during night hours, staffed by species who preferred darkness or simply didn't sleep. Right now, there were maybe 20 beings scattered across the vast room, eating at various stations designed to accommodate different biological needs. Amaya pushed through the doors. The cubs followed. 20 beings looked up. 20 beings saw the cubs. 20 beings simultaneously decided that they had urgent business literally anywhere else. The exodus was impressive. A Quilnath diplomat, all tentacles and bioluminescence, moved faster than Amaya had ever seen one of them move. A pair of Vesh traders, insectoid and normally aggressive about their territory, abandoned their meals mid-bite. Within 15 seconds, the cafeteria was empty, except for Amaya and the cubs. Well, Amaya said to the empty room, that was rude. The cubs didn't care. They could smell food, real food. Their chittering intensified, taking on an eager quality. Amaya walked to the food dispensers, the cubs trailing behind her. The dispensers were designed to accommodate dozens of species, with options ranging from liquid nutrients to live prey. She started pulling up menus, scanning for high-protein options that wouldn't make the cubs sick. Let's see. Carnivore base? High calcium for bone growth. You guys probably need something with a lot of fat content. She was talking to herself again, a habit she'd never managed to break. Definitely nothing with Quellen's spice markers. That'll mess up your digestion. Behind her, the cubs sat down. Not collapsed, not sprawled out. They sat, backs straight, in a perfect line. Waiting. Amaya glanced back and blinked. Huh. Well-trained little things, aren't you? She prepared 6 portions, adjusting the dispenser settings to account for cub metabolism. The food that came out looked like a cross between raw steak and some kind of nutrient gel. Probably tasted awful by human standards, but the cubs' noses were already working overtime. Amaya brought the first portion over to the leader, the brave one. She set it down in front of them. Okay, eat. The cub looked at her, looked at the food, looked back at her. Go on, Amaya said. It's for you. The cub chittered once, almost like asking permission, then dove into the food. Amaya repeated the process with the other 5. One by one, she set portions down, and one by one, the cubs waited for her signal before eating. It was the kind of discipline that spoke to intelligence, to social structure, to a species that understood hierarchy and respect. Amaya sat down on the floor, her back against a support column, and watched them eat. They were making happy noises now, little chirps and chitters of contentment. Their spines were starting to brighten already, responding to the nutrition. You guys have been through hell, haven't you? Amaya said quietly. Lost your parents, stuck in a storage bay, nobody coming for you. That's rough. That's really rough. The leader looked up at her, food still dripping from their snout. But you're gonna be okay, Amaya continued. Someone will come for you. Someone will take care of you properly. Until then, you've got me. And I'm pretty good at this whole keeping things alive business, if I do say so myself. In the command center, Dr. Fenn had arrived and was watching the feed with an expression that would have been shock if Quillnath facial structures allowed for such things. His tentacles were writhing in agitation, which was as close as his species got. This is unprecedented, Fenn said, his voice a melodic series of tones. Vreknari cubs are notoriously difficult to manage, even for their own species. They require constant supervision, specific dietary needs, and they bond only with pack members. This human should be dead. And yet, Thalquin said, gesturing at the feed where Amaya was now wiping food off one cub's face with her sleeve, she is not. The cubs are treating her as pack, Fenn continued, leaning closer to the monitor. Look at their body language, relaxed spines, forward ear positioning. The chittering pattern indicates contentment. They've accepted her as a guardian. In less than an hour, Vux added. Impossible, Fenn said. The bonding process takes days, sometimes weeks. Apparently not for humans, Thalquin said. He was starting to understand something, a pattern he'd seen before. Humans and animals. It was always humans and animals. Every other species in the galaxy treated non-sapient creatures as either food, threats, or inconveniences. But humans made friends with them. Pull up Earth's biological records, specifically their relationship with predator species. Vux worked quickly, projecting data onto the secondary screen. Images of Earth animals appeared: wolves, big cats, bears, creatures that should have been natural enemies, and beside them, images of humans, living with them, working with them, treating them like family. By the void, Fen whispered. They domesticated predators. Multiple species, Vux confirmed. Canines, felines, various avians. Earth's apex predators became companions. Thalquin watched Amaya on the feed. She was laughing now, because one of the cubs had climbed into her lap and was demanding attention. The others were crowding around, wanting the same. "She's not afraid of them," Thalquin said. "She doesn't see danger. She sees babies who need help." "That's suicidal," Fen said. "That's human," Thalquin corrected. And he was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy had underestimated this strange species from that backwater planet. Again, word spread through the Galactic Concordance Station like wildfire through an oxygen-rich atmosphere, which was to say, fast, chaotic, and with a lot of people making poor decisions in response. By 0330 hours, approximately half the station's population was awake and glued to their personal displays, watching the security feed like it was the galaxy's most bizarre reality entertainment program. The other half was being woken up by the first half because apparently human-walking deadly predator cubs through the cafeteria was the kind of news you absolutely had to share with your bunkmate at an ungodly hour. Betting pools formed within minutes. The Vesh traders, who would bet on literally anything, including the exact moment a star would go supernova, were taking odds on how long Amaya would survive. The current spread was heavily weighted toward not very long, with a few optimistic outliers betting on maybe she'll make it to breakfast. In the diplomatic quarters, ambassadors from 24 species were having emergency conference calls, debating whether this constituted a station-wide crisis or just another example of human weirdness that they'd learned to expect but never quite got used to. The Trilaxians wanted immediate intervention. The Quellan delegation was drafting formal complaints. The Quilnath Science Division was too busy taking notes to have an opinion. And through it all, Amaya sat on the cafeteria floor, completely oblivious to the galaxy losing its collective mind, while 6 Reknari cubs climbed over her like she was the universe's most patient jungle gym. Okay, personal space, Amaya laughed, gently extracting a cub that had decided her hair was a fascinating toy. "That's attached to my head, buddy. Let's not test how firmly." The cub chittered indignantly, but released her hair. Another one was investigating her toolkit, sniffing at various tools with intense curiosity. The leader had claimed the spot directly in front of her and was watching her face with unsettling focus. "You're smart," Amaya said to the leader. "I can see it in your eyes. You understand more than you let on, don't you?" The leader's spines flickered, a ripple of crystalline light running down their back. "Yeah, thought so." Amaya reached out slowly, telegraphing her movement. The leader didn't flinch. She scratched gently behind what she assumed were ears, though the anatomy was different enough that she couldn't be entirely sure. The leader leaned into the touch, making a deep rumbling sound that vibrated through their whole body. "You're basically space puppies," Amaya concluded. "Deadly, terrifying space puppies with way too many teeth. But still." The rumbling got louder. The other cubs, not wanting to miss out, crowded closer for attention. Amaya obliged, scratching and petting each one in turn. Their spines were surprisingly smooth, not sharp at all when they were relaxed like this. She pulled out her personal datapad and started making notes. Feeding schedule, behavioral observations, physical characteristics. It was the kind of thing she used to do back on Earth when she worked with wildlife rehab. Old habits. The leader watched her work, head tilted. If someone's coming for you guys, they'll need this information, Amaya explained. Can't just hand you off without proper documentation. That'd be irresponsible. The leader chirped. Glad you agree. What Amaya didn't know, couldn't know, was that someone was indeed coming, and that someone was about to make the situation exponentially more complicated. Huntmaster Wraith had been in deep space transit when he received the message about his distant cousin's deaths. Vren and Shal had been third-branch family, not immediate, but family nonetheless. And among the Vreknari, family obligations ran deeper than personal convenience. He'd diverted his ship immediately, pushing engines to their limits to reach the Concordance station. He was not in a good mood. Wraith had been hunting void stalkers in the Outer Rim, a job that required patience and precision, and he'd been forced to abandon the contract. The Cubs were more important, obviously, but that didn't mean he was happy about the situation. When his ship docked at 0345 hours, he was informed by a very nervous Quellan dockmaster that there was a situation involving the Cubs. What kind of situation? Wraith demanded, his translator converting his growls into galactic common. A human has them, the dockmaster said, eye stalks twitching anxiously. Wraith went very still. Explain. The dockmaster did, falling over his words in his haste. Found in storage. Human maintenance worker. Cafeteria. Currently alive somehow. Wraith's first thought was that this was some kind of sick joke. His second thought was significantly darker. Humans were weak, small, prey species by any reasonable classification. If one had his family's cubs, if one had dared to touch them without permission, without proper understanding of Vreknari custom. He didn't finish the thought. He simply started walking, his claws clicking against the deck plating with sharp, angry precision. Security personnel saw him coming and wisely got out of his way. Wraith was not a small Vreknari. He stood just over 3 meters at the shoulder, with spines that could punch through light armor and jaws that could crush bone. He'd earned his title in the traditional way, through combat and cunning, and his reputation preceded him across multiple sectors. Behind him, scrambling to keep up, was Lieutenant Vux. Huntmaster, if I may, you may not, Wraith growled. The human has not harmed the Cubs, Vux persisted, because Kareen were nothing if not committed to providing relevant information even when it was clearly unwanted. By all observations, she's been caring for them. A human, Wraith said, investing the word with profound skepticism. Caring for Vreknari cubs. This I must see before I believe. They reached the cafeteria. Wraith didn't bother with the door controls. He simply pushed through, and the doors, not designed to withstand that much force, gave way with a screech of protesting metal. Inside, Amaya looked up from her datapad. Well, that's one way to make an entrance. The cubs saw Wraith and immediately started chittering excitedly. Not in fear, in recognition. They knew what he was, knew his scent, carried family markers. But they didn't rush to him. They stayed close to Amaya, forming a protective semicircle around her. Wraith took in the scene, the human, small and fragile-looking, sitting calmly on the floor. His family's cubs, healthy and alert, arranged around her like she was pack. The empty food containers, the datapad with notes in human script. You, he said, his voice a low rumble that made the floor vibrate, are the human. That's what my species designation says, Amaya replied, showing absolutely no fear whatsoever. She stood up slowly, brushing food crumbs off her pants. And you must be family. Finally. You're here for these guys? Wraith stared at her. Most species, when confronted by an angry Vreknari, had the good sense to at least look nervous. This human was looking at him like he was late for an appointment. "They are my responsibility," Wraith said carefully. "Great. Good. Because they need proper care, and I've got a maintenance shift to finish." Amaya walked over to grab her data pad, moving right past Wraith like he was just another piece of station furniture. The cubs followed her, still chittering. "I've been documenting everything. Feeding schedule, behavioral notes, which foods they responded best to. This one," she pointed at the leader, "is the brave one. Natural pack leader. These two are siblings, I think. They stick together. That one's got a slight limp in the back left leg. Might want to get it checked." She thrust the data pad at Wraith. He took it automatically, too surprised to do anything else. "They're good kids," Amaya continued. "Smart. Well-behaved once you establish ground rules. But they've been through trauma. Lost their parents. They're going to need patience and consistency. Routine is important. Don't mess with the feeding schedule I set up. They're finally starting to settle." Wraith looked at the data pad. The notes were detailed, precise, written by someone who clearly knew what they were doing. He looked back at Amaya. "You did this in 2 hours." 2.5, Amaya corrected. "And yeah, it's kind of my thing." "Your thing?" Wraith repeated. "I raised predators back on Earth," Amaya said with a shrug. "Wildlife rehabilitation. Wolves, mostly. Some big cats. Predators are predators. Doesn't matter if they're from Earth or halfway across the galaxy. You just gotta speak their language." Wraith felt something shift in his understanding. He looked at the cubs, who were now sitting in that same perfect line, watching the exchange with interest. He looked at Amaya, this small human who somehow radiated calm authority. "You speak predator," he said slowly. "Body language, tone, consistency," Amaya listed. "And respect. Always respect. They're not pets. They're intelligent beings with their own needs and instincts. You work with that, not against it." Something in Wraith's chest, the part that held pack bonds and family honor, recognized truth when he heard it. This human understood. More than that, she'd done what most of his own species would consider the highest honor. She'd protected the vulnerable. He sat down. It was a deliberate movement, lowering himself to appear less threatening. An invitation to continue the conversation as equals. Amaya blinked in surprise but sat down as well. The cubs immediately swarmed her again, demanding attention. "How did you know to do this?" Wraith asked, genuinely curious now. "Vreknari bonding protocols are complex. Cubs are taught from hatching to be wary of other species." "Didn't know your protocols," Amaya admitted, scratching behind the leader's ears. "Just knew they were scared and hungry. So I fed them. Talked to them calm. Let them choose to trust me instead of forcing it. That's how you build relationships with any predator species." "On Earth," Wraith said, accessing his own knowledge banks, "humans evolved alongside apex predators." "Yep. Saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, cave bears. We didn't just survive them. We figured out how to live with them, how to communicate. Eventually, we domesticated some of them. Turned wolves into dogs. Made companions out of creatures that could kill us." "That is insane," Wraith said. "That's humanity," Amaya replied with a grin. "We're really good at making friends with things that have teeth." In the command center, Dr. Fenn was having what could only be described as a scientific crisis. His tentacles were writhing in patterns that indicated extreme intellectual stimulation bordering on euphoria. "Do you understand what this means?" he demanded of anyone who would listen. "We've been classifying humans wrong. Wrong! They're not prey species. They're not even persistence hunters. They're something else entirely. Explain!" Commander Thalquin ordered. Earth was a death world, yes, but not just because of environmental factors. It was a death world because it was filled with megafauna predators, creatures that could kill early humans easily. And humans didn't just survive by running or hiding. They survived by understanding those predators, reading them, communicating with them. They became, Fen paused, searching for the right term, predator whisperers. That's not a scientific classification, Vux pointed out. It should be. Fen's excitement was palpable. Every other species in the galaxy treats non-sapient predators as threats to be eliminated or avoided. But humans? Humans made them into family. They have an instinctive understanding of predator psychology that we completely missed in our initial assessments. On the feed, Wraith and Amaya were still talking, and the cubs were sprawled between them in poses of complete contentment. We thought humans were harmless, Thalquin said quietly. Adorable. Weak. We thought wrong, Fen agreed. They're not apex predators themselves. They're something potentially more dangerous. They're the species that apex predators listen to. The conversation in the cafeteria had shifted, from tense confrontation to something approaching mutual respect, which was not at all what anyone watching the security feeds had expected. Wraith, who had stormed in looking ready to disembowel someone, was now listening intently as Amaya explained the finer points of positive reinforcement training. You can't just intimidate them into obedience, Amaya was saying, gesturing with her hands in that very human way. I mean, you can, but then you get compliance without understanding. They'll follow orders out of fear, not trust. And fear breaks down the second you're not around to enforce it. Vreknari culture values strength, Wraith said. It wasn't an argument, just a statement of fact. Sure, but strength isn't just physical dominance. It's consistency, reliability, being the steady presence they can count on. Amaya scratched the leader under the chin. This little one already knew that. They knew their parents were strong because their parents were there. Now those parents are gone, and they need someone else to be that anchor. Wraith was quiet for a moment, his spines flickering with thought patterns. You understand pack dynamics. I understand that babies need stability, Amaya said. Doesn't matter what species. When their world gets turned upside down, they need someone to make it right again. One of the smaller cubs had fallen asleep against Amaya's leg, little body rising and falling with steady breaths. Wraith observed this with an expression that might have been surprise, if Vreknari faces could show such things clearly. They trust you completely, he said. Yeah. Well, Amaya looked down at the sleeping cub with obvious affection. I've got a face that says responsible adult, even though I'm absolutely making this up as I go. Wraith made a sound that his translator rendered as laughter. It was a harsh, barking noise, but genuine. You are strange, human. Amaya, she corrected. And yeah, I get that a lot. Amaya, Wraith repeated, testing the name. I am called Wraith, Huntmaster of the Third Fleet, cousin to Vren and Shael. I'm sorry for your loss, Amaya said, and meant it. They must have been good people to raise cubs this well-adjusted. They were honorable, Wraith agreed. The cubs will be told stories of them when they are old enough to understand. Good. They should know where they came from. Wraith looked at his datapad again, scrolling through Amaya's notes. This is more detailed than most Vreknari care documentation. You did this in hours. Like I said, it's kind of my thing. Amaya stretched, joints popping. I grew up on Old Earth, Montana, rural preservation zone. We ran a wildlife rehabilitation center. If something was hurt or orphaned, it ended up on our doorstep. Wolves were my specialty, but we handled everything from bears to wildcats to raptors. Earth predators, Wraith said. The finest, Amaya said with pride. Humans and wolves go way back, thousands of years. We hunted together, lived together. Eventually, we bred them into dogs. Best decision we ever made, honestly. Dogs are amazing. You took apex predators and made them companions. More than that, partners, friends, family. Amaya's voice softened. My best friend growing up was a wolf named Ghost. Big white male, yellow eyes, scared the hell out of everyone who met him. But he was gentle with me, protected me. When I was sad, he'd just sit with me until I felt better. That's what predators can be when you treat them right. Wraith processed this. His culture revered predators, respected them, but the idea of genuine companionship with non-sapient species was foreign. Intriguing. And this works with Vreknari cubs. Apparently, Amaya grinned. Though I'll be honest, I was about 60% sure they were going to eat me when I first found them. They would have, if they did not trust you, Wraith said bluntly. Vreknari cubs are taught wariness for survival. The fact that they accepted you means they saw something in you that registered as safe, as pack. Body language, Amaya said. I kept myself non-threatening, moved slowly. Didn't make direct eye contact at first. Let them approach on their terms. Same techniques I'd use with a scared wolf pup. You treat all predators the same. The basics are universal. Respect their space. Read their signals. Don't be unpredictable. Amaya shrugged. After that, it's just about paying attention to the individual. Each of these cubs has a different personality. You gotta work with that, not against it. At that moment, the cafeteria doors opened again, and Dr. Fenn rushed in, tentacles waving with barely contained excitement. Behind him, moving more sedately, came Commander Thalquin and Lieutenant Vux. Amaya, Fenn exclaimed. I have questions. So many questions. How did you establish pack hierarchy? What communication methods did you employ? Did you notice any species-specific behavioral patterns that diverge from Earth predator models? Amaya blinked at the sudden influx of beings. Hi? Dr. Fenn is enthusiastic, Commander Thalquin said dryly. But his questions are valid. What you've accomplished here is unprecedented. I just fed some hungry cubs, Amaya protested. You bonded with Vreknari young in less than 3 hours, Vux corrected. The xenobiology department considers this impossible. Clearly not that impossible, Amaya said, gesturing at the cubs currently using her as furniture. Wraith stood, drawing attention. The human, Amaya, has demonstrated exceptional understanding of Vreknari needs. The cubs are healthy and secure under her care. Which raises interesting questions about human capabilities, Fenn said, pulling up holographic displays from his personal device. Your species evolved on a death world alongside numerous apex predators. Canines, felines, ursines, various reptilian and avian species. You didn't just compete with them, you integrated them into your social structures. We like animals, Amaya said. Is that really so weird? Yes, Fenn's tentacles waggled emphatically. Every other species views non-sapient predators as threats or resources. Only humans consistently form emotional bonds with them. Only humans have successfully domesticated multiple predator species. This isn't normal behavior, Amaya. This is exceptional. Amaya looked uncomfortable with the attention. Look, I'm just a maintenance tech who knows her way around sharp teeth. It's not that deep. It is precisely that deep, Commander Thalquin said. The galaxy has classified humans as harmless, friendly, weak even. We're not weak, Amaya said. a hint of steel in her voice. "No," Thalquin agreed. "You're the species that walks with predators. That's not weakness. That's something else entirely." Wraith made a thoughtful rumble. In Vreknari culture, there is a saying, "The strongest warrior is not the one who defeats the beast, but the one who makes the beast choose to follow." We considered it metaphorical. "Turns out it's human job description," Amaya said wryly. The leader cub chose that moment to wake up and demand attention, chirping insistently at Amaya. She obliged automatically, scratching and cooing. "Would you consider working with Vreknari younglings?" Wraith asked suddenly. "In an official capacity. Many of our young lack proper guidance. Someone with your skills could be valuable." "I've got a full-time job fixing broken air recyclers," Amaya pointed out, "which pays poorly and offers no interesting challenges," Commander Thalquin observed.